All righty. So I'm very pleased to our next panel you'll see here. It starts right now, and it's entitled Advancing Awareness and Participation in Clinical Trials for Black Men's Brain Health. And you all know Dr. Eric Griggs here. We also have Dr. Doris Molina Henry. Unfortunately, Dr. Woody Neighbors, if you'll see him on the program, he was not able to attend today. But we also have Dr. Charles Wyndham. And so I'm going to just ask real quickly Dr. Molina Henry and Dr. Wyndham to introduce themselves, say a little hello introduction, and then we'll get started in a little Q&A, and we're going to have a microphone that we're passing along. Is that Dr. Smith coming? There she is. All right. To be able, so how about if glad to have you. All right, come on. So what I'm going to ask everyone to first, starting off, to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, what the work you're doing, and then we'll kind of go down. We'll skip Dr. Griggs, and then I have a couple questions for you. So please.
Sure. Good morning. I'm Doris Molina Henry. I'm faculty at the University of Southern California, where I work particularly within the Alzheimer's Therapeutic Research Institute. I'm also a recruitment, engagement, and retention co-associate lead for the recruitment, engagement, and retention unit of the Alzheimer's Clinical Trials Consortium.
All right.
Good morning. My name is Charles Wyndham. I'm one of the behavioral neurologists at the University of California, San Francisco, and also a faculty member there. My research focuses specifically on biomarkers of Alzheimer's disease and the intersection between biomarkers and social determinants of health. I also lead our community engagement efforts to the African American community in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Good morning, right?
That's right.
Good morning, I'm Sayon Smith. I am a native of New Orleans and actually started when I was in the 10th grade as a ChemStar student here at Xavier University, so I'm especially happy to be here. My research focuses, primarily mixed method research focuses on environmental crisis, environmental risks, and in that it takes me to the study of food and how our environment impacts all that we do when I stay in this space of the risk society. My work, my research work, my administrative work, my faculty research work is primarily, I've been the private investigator for grants under the Department of Homeland Security. I studied environmental risk and hazards under a grant from the Department of the Navy, and several FEMA grants at several of our HBCUs, Grambling State University, Dillard University, and began my research studies and practice at Arizona State University. This work actually met, almost collided, I guess I could say, in my personal journey as a primary caregiver for my mother who's suffering with Alzheimer's, and now care for my grandmother, her mother, who also suffered with Alzheimer's, and now managing and working with her niece and her nephew. So I've combined now in my work in our community, my research in environmental risk and hazards and its impact on brain health.
All right. So, Dr. Smith, I'm going to start with you because we are in New Orleans. We've heard a lot about food. It's really important in the culture. So let's first start off by saying, can you tell us what is the relationship or the role or the impact of food on brain health?
There is a theory in social science that we talk about called the risk society. Early researchers, Giddens and Ulrich, presented this theory, and essentially what it says is, as we have transformed from an agrarian society to our technological society, more modern society, we've begun to think about risks, and we've processed them and almost normalized them in a way that we aren't realizing the impacts of our environment and our bodies in the decisions that we're making, to do things faster, to do things better. So how we eat, what we eat, when we eat are key factors. How important our gut health is to our brain health, the decisions that we make, the impact of sitting in traffic. It's become normal, but what is that doing to our bodies? and love New Orleans food, love our food. And in talking, as Dr. Griggs said, we have to talk, and in having several conversations with family, community, and friends, we can still enjoy our greens and those things that we like, but in a different way. But that means we have to think about the choices that we're making in the context of our overall society right now, where we're making a lot of decisions based upon crisis and risk. And food is an important component of that. Blueberries, our vegetables, how we eat them, how we cook them, and it's a big factor in Alzheimer's and dementia, as we all know, which is now a type 3 form of diabetes now.
So I'm going to just follow up with that before we go down. So I was an Uber driver yesterday. We were riding in his car, and he was asking me, so what does it mean to be in New Orleans? He said, listen, he said, I was here, I've been here all my life. I was displaced during Katrina. He said, I went to DeSoto, Texas, outside of Dallas for a little while, and as soon as I could get back, I had to come on back. And I said, well, so why being in New Orleans is so important? And he said, it's just the food, the culture, it's everything. So people steeped in tradition and culture, how in the world would you have a conversation with people about food when in fact food is so important? Like Greg said, you're not going to just reduce the amount of, that dash that you're putting up in the food. How can you have that?
Tony Sashary.
There you go. Hey man, stop that.
I'm just saying.
Stop that. I'm not supposed to remember them details.
Po thing.
But Dr. Smith, talk to us about that.
Courage. You have to talk. And you have to talk about, some of the risks, and the people, our family members that we're talking to, it relies a lot upon them being honest, not giving us good, fine, I know, answers. Look, I came back home and I don't eat meat. Imagine that conversation, right? Imagine me trying to order and find food, but it is really digging down and looking at someone's eyes and saying, how do you really feel? How do you feel after you finish eating that? Yes, you enjoyed it, but how do you feel right now? How do you feel when you go to the store, especially ladies, and you're changing your size every trip? And that's why I start with courage. We have to have that conversation and teach one another. My cousins and I, we fooled everyone a couple of Christmases ago. The greens had kale in them. The mac and cheese, it was rice macaroni, and it was what I call fake cheese. We used the avocado oil butter, and we waited until all of the older folks in our family had finished everything, gone back for second or thirds, and we said, let us tell you what's in there.
Brilliant.
Give it up. So Dr. Wyndham, this is about awareness, right? Our conversation today is about awareness and preparation in clinical trials for Black men, right? So as a Black man who's out in the community, what are some of the challenges that you're facing in your community? What are some of the things that you hear when we talk about getting Black men into research or clinical trials?
Absolutely. So I had an interesting conversation this morning that I want to share some of the details of, and I think it helps kind of reframe our approach with regards to increasing participation for Black men in clinical trials. We're so very much focused on the question of why aren't there enough Black men in clinical trials? But I think we maybe need to change our emphasis to a question of what then? So imagine a world where there are no longer disparities with regards to participation in clinical trials. The rates of participation among Black men, white men, et cetera, are equal. What then? What does that actually translate into for Black men? Does that actually mean that their brain health will be significantly better than it was prior? Does it mean that they will have the same level of clinical care access as other individuals? And this idea of what then was inspired in part by a conversation I had with one of our community advisory board members who's a Black male who told me, Charles, the problem with participating in research is there's no cavalry. There's no cavalry coming for us. There's nobody coming to save us thereafter. I can come, and he's one of our participants, I can come to your center and participate in research trials. I'm still going to have the same problems accessing clinical care. I'm still going to have the same problems accessing affordable medications. So even if I do all of these things, the appreciable difference that I have in my day-to-day life with regards to trying to protect my brain health feels like it's negligible. I don't feel like I'm making any substantial progress. And so I think that's informed our approach in large part from a standpoint of when we think about research and participation in research, we have to think about how is this actually going to benefit the individual who's sitting in front of me. Yes, there's idea of altruism and helping generations to come thereafter, but when I'm speaking with a Black male who's 65 years old, life expectancy is maybe 70, what do the next 5 years actually look like in terms of better health for his brain because of his participation in my research? And if I'm doing research that's not answering that question, that is not actually translating into a meaningful impact in terms of better access to care or other things for that person, I think it's short-sighted. I think it misses the mark in many ways, and that is in large part from the conversations I've had, a big barrier to participation in research. Just a quick note, being in San Francisco is not a big place, 7 by 7 miles. I see patients at our institution. I also see patients within the community at a number of community centers. There's a community center I take care of folks in that's half a mile away from our institution. People who are served there, predominantly African American, Latino, many Black men I see there. The people I take care of there will not make it to our institution. It's a half a mile away, but because of the systemic barriers around healthcare, other problems with regards to access, they will not actually make it to the door where we offer some of the most novel therapies for Alzheimer's disease treatment currently.
Thank you for that. Dr. Melina Henry, you're on the front lines. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? Be a whisperer for us. Tell us what's going on.
So one of the things that I want to point out, and I want to echo a lot of what Dr. Winden has mentioned, is that the challenge of initially bringing people in and the many barriers of access that exist. And we really have taken a concerted effort, at least since I've been in this capacity, to ensure that we were minimizing those access barriers. And of course, I work at a central location, meaning that I work with many other clinical sites, and our hope is that those clinical sites have the resources to support participants in coming and in engaging. And so we've gone through barrier after barrier. If it's transportation, making sure that there's access to transportation, that an Uber driver can pick you up and bring you to the clinic visits for every single appointment. We remove that barrier. We make sure that individuals have a location to park and a number of different things. There are some things that are not as easy to navigate given the historical, maybe the underpinnings of a particular institution in a specific location. So really having community health workers go out into those spaces, even bringing those individuals into that space so that they can now be deployed from those locations and engage with the community and make sure that they are a warm hand that walks them into the clinic doors and helps them participate and have that journey through the trial. What's interesting is that as much as we delved into resolving these many issues, we still saw that disproportionately individuals from communities of color in general were less likely to participate in our Alzheimer's disease trials. And in doing the deeper dive, now that we have plasma biomarkers available, one thing became very apparent to us, and that there is possibly a difference in the pathology that we are trying to tackle in Alzheimer's disease among certain communities. And so now there's a lot of bias. We're looking at a clinical sample of individuals who were willing to be clinical trial volunteers. But if this holds true, it is very possible that we need to find other treatments, other mechanisms of treatments that may at a large benefit all communities that may suffer from dementia in the future. And so it is the participation of the individuals that has allowed us to come to that finding. It's not just the fact that you enter the trial, that you make it into the trial, that you're qualified to be in it and remain throughout it. I think it's just that even that initial step of screening for a trial informs the entire field of what might be the limitations of that study and what might be the needs of specific communities. So I think it's a call to action also from that perspective.
I echo what you said. I had a conversation this morning with my uncle in preparing to speak today, and he was like, so if we did, then what? Like what changes? And I had no answer. But being honest, like, I don't know, let's figure it out. And then the other thing that I want to bring up is you brought up the process of screening. That can be really defeating for someone that you've been trying to convince to be a part of a clinical trial, And for whatever reason, usually not of their own fault, they're not, and that's it. And what happens is that word spreads and that cell turns into this large bubble of folks that, you lose credibility. And typically the experience that I've had down here is that you get twice to mess up. First time, that's okay. Second time you mess up, they're not coming back for a third.
So instead of me being the moderator now, I'm going to turn the mic over and open it up for questions.
Anyone have a question? I'll bring the mic to you. Let's engage with this amazing panel.
Stand up, stand up. Get up, stand up, please. Stand up. Yes, stand up.
Hello.
Hello, my name is Chris Carey from Indiana University School of Medicine. Thank you for giving us your time. So my question has to deal with, excuse me, I want to look at him. My question has to deal with, can anyone speak to the time barrier? Because my work, even introducing some interventions to the community, when we bring the interventions there, it still seems to be a challenge of getting participants to participate because they just don't have the time. They have to work, they have children, they have families, they have all of that. And even some of the participants that are more senior, we're starting to see that they're still working, even at like the ages of 60 and above.
Can I, this has been an important conversation that we've had in a lot of circles, and a number of experts continue to bring that up, and I think it really is a call for policy change. I think if we began to see participation in research as something that deserves space and time, even by employers, it could really make a difference for individuals to feel that they have the opportunity to connect in these spaces, particularly when these are spaces that they would benefit from the perspective of finding treatments in the future. And I don't want to oversell, because I completely agree. There's no immediate benefit to participating in the trial unless the treatment was effective and you had the actual target for that treatment. But I do think that there is benefit to research participation and being a part of the community that is advancing our understanding of disease and what treatments need to be developed for that purpose.
Sure. I think the other thing is we need to, as researchers, change the way we approach clinical trials from a standpoint of making clinical trials easier for people to participate in. What I mean by that is specifically when you mentioned time, if you look at the confines of most clinical trials, you have to be at a clinical trial site Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. What's the problem with that? I'm working, I have other care responsibilities, et cetera, et cetera. So as researchers, we can start to change essentially how we conduct our clinical trials, having weekend hours, having off hours. Yes, that includes a greater cost. I don't want to, overlook that, but I think if we want to do responsible research that really does accommodate individuals, we have to look at additional hours of operation. The other thing I think it's critical in this conversation is compensation. So again, speaking with our community advisory board members, we asked them what they thought a reasonable compensation was for a simple 8-hour day for a clinical trial. They said $100 an hour. $100 an hour, that's $800 for a single day participation for one participant. Many clinical trials, $50 for their entire research participation, maybe $100 if you're lucky. It's not enough really to compensate that individual's time. And that's on top of what Dr. Molina Henry mentioned with regards to offering assistance with transportation and all the other things, childcare, et cetera, that need to be in place so that people can even participate.
Question?
You can get your steps in today.
And then so. Back on the basketball court.
Thank you so much. So Dina Darlington, and thank you all so much for being here today and sharing your insights and your knowledge. This goes out to the entire panel. So we know that we've had a chilling effect on DE&I in Washington, and the FDA had put out these diversity action plans a few years, which was really motivating drug manufacturers to be inclusive of community in clinical trials. What are your thoughts as to, with this new shift around DE&I under this administration, how do you feel that will impact clinical trials at a community level, but also those sponsors of clinical trials that at one point I think was a bit more encouraged to focus on community?
I'm gonna point to Dr. Griggs right
Yeah, boy, all bing, 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 what's going on? The first thing I thought about is I would love to see a study to see how much things have changed. I think it was November 23 when they came out with the mandate.
23.
23, yeah. I don't know. That means you get more money to try to get the under-resourced communities involved, but I don't think the community responded. So, again, a lot of questions about whether or not the community would respond. They go back to the very basics. The essence of why we're here is that, what are we going to do differently? Throwing money at it's not going to work. Taking social determinants of health and putting a true lens on where people live and what's effective with them, later that over our approach to clinical trials before we go to the community. I think that whether there's a mandate or not, that's what we're all talking about. What time do you have kids? Do you need daycare? Is this convenient for you? Something else that comes up is like, so, Doc, if I get in your clinical trial and I start to get better and your trial's over, can I stay on it?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to say no sometimes. So what happens? Being able to think about all these things before you go, as a kid before you wanted to go to a party, you knew that it was like 50-50, you had to get all your facts straight and get everything before you went to your mom, like, okay, it's this, it's this, it's this. Well, it's the same thing with the community, because no matter whether there's a law that says they need to be included or not, it's the same problem. We're going back trying to extract. Does that make sense?
Anybody else?
Can I, oh, no, go ahead.
Not directly on the clinical trials, but to the effect, right, the impact. Yes, there are some things that we need to change in terms of our lens and in terms of our approach. Some of the things that I think many of us are concerned about right now, the HBCU Emergency Management Consortium, one of the things that we talked about was we talked, right? We engaged one another and our communities about risks, hazards, threats, and dangers in our communities. And we centered on the historically Black institutions across this country that are intentionally, right, geographically placed in our communities. And that conversation for so many years was very, very helpful, because we started to have a larger conversation, academic and research conversation, also brought in various agencies, volunteer agencies and groups across the country to talk about how do we mitigate disasters, hazards, environmental threats, food threats in our communities, and also how do we then begin to educate and raise up this next generation of not just first responders, but people who understand and can look at our communities from a way and from a lens of how do we become more resilient, right? How can we thrive? The consideration now is, yes, we see what's happening, but we cannot stop the conversations. We don't need a policy to have a webinar. We don't need a policy to have a community, to have this. We don't need to have that. Every church that I've attended in my, throughout my professional career, I've worked to start an emergency management ministry in that church. The policies don't stop that. So our policies have been eroded from the FDA, USDA. I'll say the Reagan era, he kind of punctuated everything. But we've been dealing with the threats to what we eat, our environment, how we get our food on the table, our physical structure for generations. But what can't stop, what those policies cannot stop, is what's happening right now. So we have to put these brains to work and figure out how do we support making sure that you have the time to get people like me, I'm not a medical professional, but can talk to help make our communities more comfortable with understanding, look, this is what's happening in my family, this is what's happening in our community, and helping them and getting them so that they can reach out and grab your warm hand and get to our clinical trials.
Can I add to that? Because there's another part. At the beginning, earlier when I talked, I wanted to know how many people had participated in a clinical trial. If you want someone to participate in something, the first question I always get, which is why I had to take my vaccine on camera, is, did you do it?
Yep.
Modeling. All of us in here qualify for some clinical trial. Some, and there's different levels, as invasive as you want, non-invasive as you want. We all qualify for something, so it's modeling, so it can be an experiential thing that we can talk about. Well, you can expect this, and I did this, and well, I didn't make this one, and I didn't make this one, and it's remember the oxytocin? It's the connectivity.
I wanted to add that while we see these major changes at a large, one of the things that I find that we need to, while it doesn't change at the community level, and while we might not, that may not make a difference, where it could make a difference, and where I was afraid it might, is at the level of accountability in ensuring that individuals, that there were resources to ensure that these studies were reaching spaces and communities that needed to hear about them, that had not either engaged with them before. And so it really allowed us to have very concerted, dedicated, tailored efforts to engage specific communities that had been underrepresented in those studies. Now, when I did the deep soul seeking and also engaging with our leadership at our institutions, I think what we had to keep in mind is that at the core of the work that we're doing, particularly for Alzheimer's clinical trials or dementia trials, is ensuring that there are treatments for disease-suffering population. Mm-hmm. And if there's a large proportion of individuals from any given community that is underrepresented in a trial, it's not about whether it's D, E, and I. It's ultimately, it is a need that must be met at a societal level. Mm-hmm. And I think the economics of that let us know that these efforts will not stop. We will continue, but we do need your engagement. We need the participation. We need talking to communities and continuing to inform them. While things are not perfect, we also need to understand that research encompasses a number of different tools and strategies and designs that allow us to learn about different aspects of disease. When we're talking about clinical trials, as you've heard already today, we're talking about testing interventions before they go to market. They've come all the way from animal testing to, in a very small group of people, safety testing, again, safety testing and efficacy testing, and ultimately, let's see in the broader swath of the population, do we see a similar reaction, a similar response? We need that sample to represent the disease-suffering population, those that will develop the disease in time. And that in itself is going to be the driver ultimately for ensuring that all communities are participating.
We've got a question from our virtual audience. Deshaun Middleton from North Carolina Central University, HBCU in Durham, North Carolina. How do you determine the interventions you focus on in your research? And what inspired you to pursue a career in the research field?
Sure. I think this dovetails a little bit off of what Dr. Molina Henry was mentioning with regards to how do you determine the intervention that you're going to pursue. I think you have to look at what is the need with regards to the disease-suffering population. What is the need with regards to the community? So if I approach a community with the idea of a clinical trial, and that community then tells me, well, nobody in this community has that condition, and even the individuals who have that condition, there are X, Y, and Z other conditions that are in front of it in terms of what are actually impacting our day-to-day health. I need to change my lens with regards to what intervention I'm ultimately going to pursue. So I think you have to have that level of engagement with community, and that needs to happen largely before the clinical trial is even designed. And this is a problem in and of itself. Many researchers design these clinical trials based off previous research that has been done, and then they go into the communities where the communities have never been a part of that research historically, and they try to run the intervention, try to run the trial, and it's not successful because it's not actually addressing the community's need. I think the second part of that question was motivation, if I'm not mistaken, for getting into this field.
Yes.
My motivation is that I was a caregiver before I actually even went off to medical school. I helped my father take care of his mother who had moderate severe Alzheimer's, and that changed my trajectory.
Let's see. As I said, I'm a native of New Orleans, and growing up, not really paying attention to it, but growing up understanding our evacuation plan, I knew how to tape up my windows, I knew how to do all these things. Didn't think anything about that further than this is just what you do when you're from this part of the South. Then moved on to consult with BP during the BP oil spill. And I watched the impact of that spill on hardworking people in our seafood industry, how it decimated a community, and that then became my motivation to really look deeper into what are the physical, social, cultural, economic, and financial threats that impact the way that we live. And I focused on hurricanes and environmental threats specifically as a result of that, and then moved on to specifically study under the grant from the Navy, as I mentioned, Hurricane Sandy. My motivation became, though, of course, Hurricane Katrina, because so many lives lost, not just physical property lost, as I said, lives lost. And there was a saying, I heard many of us would say here in New Orleans, that some of our loved ones died because of a broken heart. Had an aunt, passed away. She made it to Arkansas and just died of a broken heart. You're the medical professionals. I won't elaborate on that, but that was my inspiration, because in investigating how our country responds to environmental threats and disasters, I wanted to dig deeper into that to figure out why does it have to end that way? What are the things that we can control? What are the things that we can do to really and truly create safer, stronger, more resilient communities? And my other driving passion behind that is there isn't any place else in the world other than Louisiana and New Orleans specifically where we can uncover the answers to those questions.
Okay.
Good morning, panel. I had a question. I'm Dr. Toykus Westbrook, a graduate of Howard University and Meharry Medical College. I wanted to ask about the question posed earlier. What would it take for the fringe benefit of being a participant in a clinical trial to gain a medical home, to gain the comprehensive medical care that that particular participant is lacking? Because if we can draw them in to concentrate on this particular issue, why can we not then reward them with, hey, you have now access to this particular medical center, this particular medical system? Thank you.
Great question.
Can I, so Dr. Westbrook is a colleague of mine, and at one point we did own a clinical research facility here. We had a small one. And we were offering just that because of policy changes here, and this is before the Affordable Care Act, just to allow people to have care. We were taking phase 3 and 4 clinical trials, drugs that were coming back up, just so we could help people, because there were like, I forgot how many million people that didn't have care. But then after doing my own research on the Tuskegee experiment, that's exactly the way that it started, if you remember, as I said, and it was a great experiment until it wasn't. That's it. Interesting question.
All right. You know what? Here. We're done, unfortunately. This first of all was great. It is really good, and I have to stop it because we got to stay on schedule. But I think right as we're getting to the meat of things, so please, if you have questions, you see them out around. We have a fellowship evening tonight that they're going to be available. Make sure that you get, come on up to them and ask your questions. So first of all, I just want to say thank you so very much to this panel for being here. Give it up for them, and we look forward to having an opportunity to talk to you a little bit more today. Thank you.